The explosive revelation that General Michael Langley, head of U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, allegedly issued a blunt ultimatum to African leaders has sent shockwaves across diplomatic and political circles. According to multiple confidential sources, Langley warned Mali's interim president Assimi Goïta, Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and other Sahelian leaders that their nations must publicly and humbly seek Donald Trump's favor or face devastating consequences. The threats reportedly include immediate cuts to military aid, crippling economic sanctions, and even covert support for opposition movements to undermine resistant governments. The private meetings, which took place over the past month, were described as tense and confrontational. One Malian official, speaking on condition of anonymity, claimed Langley framed the 2024 U.S. election as a decisive turning point. He told us, if Trump returns, he will remember who knelt and who defied him, and the latter will regret it. The message was clear: align early with Trump's expected transactional foreign policy or be left isolated, economically strangled, and vulnerable to instability. Langley's alleged warnings appear to exploit growing anxieties over a potential Trump second term, where loyalty could dictate aid, trade, and security partnerships. However, critics have slammed the approach as extortion and a dangerous return to Cold War-era strong-arm tactics. The Biden administration has yet to confirm or deny the reports, but the leak has already inflamed anti-American sentiment in the Sahel, where military juntas have increasingly turned to Russia for support. If verified, Langley's threats mark a dramatic escalation in U.S. efforts to counter Russian and Chinese influence in Africa, but risk backfiring by pushing nations further toward America's adversaries. As Traoré and his allies weigh their next move, the fallout could redefine geopolitics on the continent. The ultimatum delivered by General Langley hinges on a single volatile variable: the potential return of Donald Trump to the White House. Insiders familiar with the discussions reveal that Langley's warning was not just a random threat, but a calculated bet on Trump's transactional approach to foreign policy. During his first term, Trump made it clear that traditional alliances meant little unless they came with direct benefits for the U.S. nations that praised him or offered concessions, such as Morocco's normalization deal with Israel, were rewarded, while those that criticized him faced aid cuts and diplomatic cold shoulders. Langley's message to African leaders suggests a belief that Trump's second term would double down on this loyalty for survival framework. The timing of the warning is critical. With Trump leading in key polls and the 2024 election looming, Langley appears to be positioning African nations ahead of a possible geopolitical shift. The implied argument is that those who establish ties with Trump's circle now, whether through flattery, policy alignment, or behind-the-scenes deals, could secure protection from future punitive measures. Proponents of this strategy argue it's a pragmatic move in an era where great power competition dictates survival. Critics, however, see it as reckless coercion that undermines decades of U.S. diplomacy and pushes vulnerable nations toward Russia and China. Trump himself has remained silent on the matter, but his past rhetoric offers clues. He has repeatedly dismissed foreign aid as handouts unless they serve U.S. interests, and his America First doctrine leaves little room for multilateral cooperation. If Langley's warnings reflect an unofficial Trump world strategy, it signals a future where African governments must navigate a U.S. policy that operates more like a business negotiation than a partnership. The question now is whether African leaders will play along or reject what many see as a new form of imperial pressure. The response from Burkina Faso's fiery leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, was swift and uncompromising. Within hours of the leaked ultimatum, the young military ruler appeared on national television in his signature red beret, delivering a blistering rebuke that immediately went viral across Africa. They think we are still colonies that must kneel before foreign masters, Traoré thundered, his words punctuated by the cheers of supporters in Ouagadougou's Revolution Square. But let me remind Washington, Burkina Faso bows to no one, not to Langley, not to Trump, not to anyone. His defiance struck a chord far beyond his nation's borders, with Mali's junta releasing a statement within minutes declaring full solidarity with Traoré's position, while Niger's state media ran the speech on loop alongside anti-American commentary. Behind the scenes, security sources reveal Traoré's government accelerated emergency talks with Russian military advisors and Wagner Group contractors, fast-tracking discussions about expanded arms shipments and training programs. A senior Burkina Faso defense official speaking anonymously confirmed, "We're done begging the West for scraps. If they want to threaten us, we'll find partners who don't attach political strings to bullets needed to fight terrorists." The rhetoric mirrors a broader Sahelian playbook. Since coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, all three nations have expelled French forces while welcoming Russian influence, framing it as resistance against neocolonialism. Yet Traoré's gamble carries enormous risks. U.S. military aid currently funds critical counterterrorism operations in the region, and Langley's threats could materialize as devastating sanctions. But the 35-year-old leader appears to be betting that his populist anti-Western stance and potential Russian backing will outweigh the costs. As one Bamako-based diplomat put it, Traoré isn't just rejecting Langley's ultimatum, he's lighting a match under America's entire Sahel strategy. The coming weeks will test whether his defiance inspires a continent-wide revolt or becomes a cautionary tale. The leaked ultimatum has sent shockwaves through African capitals, leaving leaders across the continent grappling with an impossible dilemma. While Traoré's defiant stance resonates with populist factions, more moderate governments find themselves caught between maintaining crucial Western partnerships and avoiding the appearance of capitulation to American pressure. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings are taking place from Abuja to Addis Ababa as nations assess their precarious position in what many see as a new Cold War alignment. Some governments, particularly those dependent on U.S. security assistance and IMF programs, are reportedly exploring discreet channels to Trump's inner circle. A senior diplomat from a West African nation, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed, "We can't afford Traoré's bravado. Our counterterrorism operations rely on American intelligence, and our economy needs Washington's goodwill at the World Bank." These nations walk a tightrope, seeking to appease potential future U.S. leadership without provoking backlash from their own populations, where anti-Western sentiment runs high. Meanwhile, the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa has become a battleground of competing visions. Pro-Western members like Kenya and Nigeria urge cautious diplomacy, while anti-interventionist states led by Mali and South Africa push for collective resistance. The divisions run so deep that emergency summit talks have twice been postponed, with AU Commission Chair Moussa Faki struggling to draft a unified statement that won't further antagonize Washington. Civil society groups warn the crisis could destabilize fragile democracies. This isn't just about foreign policy, it's throwing fuel on Africa's internal political fires, said Dakar-based analyst Aissatou Diallo. Governments seen as bowing to Trump may face protests, while those aligning with Traoré risk economic strangulation. As the continent fractures along geopolitical fault lines, the ultimate cost may be African unity itself, with Langley's ultimatum accelerating a scramble for allegiances that could reshape the continent's future. The geopolitical shockwaves from General Langley's ultimatum are radiating far beyond Africa, triggering a rapid realignment of global power dynamics that threatens to upend decades of U.S. foreign policy. Within hours of Traoré's defiant speech, the Kremlin issued a statement praising African nations' sovereign right to choose partners, while Chinese state media began running segments highlighting American diplomatic blackmail. Both powers are moving swiftly to capitalize on the rift, with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reportedly preparing an emergency tour of Sahel capitals and China's Africa envoy offering immediate debt restructuring talks to vulnerable nations. European capitals are watching with growing alarm, particularly Paris, where officials fear a complete collapse of Western influence in its former colonies. This could be Suez Crisis levels of geopolitical disaster, warned a senior French diplomat, referencing the 1956 event that marked the end of Britain and France's imperial dominance. The EU's foreign policy chief has called for urgent consultations with Washington, while privately expressing frustration that Langley's cowboy diplomacy has undermined years of careful engagement. In Washington, the fallout has exposed dangerous fractures within the Biden administration. While the State Department scrambles to contain the damage, Pentagon insiders suggest Langley may have acted with tacit approval from defense hawks pushing for a tougher Africa stance. The White House finds itself trapped, disavowing the general. Risks looking weak on China and Russia, but endorsing his approach could accelerate the very African realignment it seeks to prevent. Meanwhile, the global South is watching closely. From Latin America to Southeast Asia, governments are drawing uncomfortable parallels to their own experiences with U.S. pressure. As Brazilian political analyst Carlos Almeida noted, Langley just gave every non-aligned nation a masterclass in why they need alternatives to American patronage. The ultimate victors may be Beijing and Moscow, who need only watch as America's own heavy-handedness does their work for them.